or desire. Krodha is anger. Kama, Krodha, Parayana. Parayana means one is dedicated to this. One is centered on these two things. Kama, Krodha, Parayana.
Kama Krodha Parayana.
Ihante. Ihante means driven by this. These two. Kama, Bhogartham. In seeking the fulfillment of desire. The pleasure from the fulfillment of Kama, Bhoga, Artham. Artha is purpose. Bhoga is pleasure. Desire is Kama. So, for the purpose of fulfilling desire. Ihante Kama Bhogartham.
Ihante Kama Bhogartham.
Anyaya. Anyaya is injustice or unfairness. Anyaya by unfair means Artha Sanchayan. A person, Artha is here meaning wealth. Which a person accumulates wealth by unfair means. Anyayenartha sanchayan. Asha, both required. Or is it? Okay. Why is that? So this is going to YouTube. That's interesting. Okay, sure. Asha pashashatair baddhaha kama krodha parayanaha ihante kama bhogartham anyayenartha sanchayan asha pashashatair baddhaha kama krodha parayanaha ihante kama bhogartham anyayenartha sanchayan. One last time. Let's recite together now. Asha pashishatair baddhaha kama krodha parayanaha ihante kama bhogartham anyayenartha sanchayan. Thank you. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Ita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Am I audible to everyone clearly? Yes. Thank you very much for coming today. And so I'll be discussing today from the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is, does anyone know the title of this chapter or what it is about? Okay, the divine and demoniac natures. So basically, there are some people who are very self-righteous. Some religious people, they have the attitude of holier than thou. I think about 4 or 5 years ago, when I think the first time I had come here to Texas. So I had been driving for a program and I saw one T-shirt or one car which had a bumper sticker written on it. It said, "Oh God, please save me from your preachers." So the idea is that God, the word save is very much associated with Christianity. And the idea is that God saves us through his preachers. But the preachers are very much holier than thou, condescending, almost nauseating. I don't want to associate with such people. So sometimes this can happen to those who are practicing some kind of religion or spirituality, that they develop a superiority complex. So this chapter is called Divine and Demoniac Nature. So I remember once we had a drama about how not to share the Bhagavad Gita wisdom. So, so it was about this kid basically, not a drama. So it was one person goes and tells another person, maybe this person is just coming out of a bar or something, and he says, I have this book. He says, what is it about? He says, it is about you. Oh, really? He says, yeah, read the 16th chapter. The verses 5 onwards are about you. The first 3 verses are about me. So the first 3 verses are about the divine nature. And the subsequent verses are about the demoniac nature. So the idea that I am a good person and other people are bad people. That is quite a toxic idea. So both of them are being used, is it? Or these are 2 different people?
That one I don't know. That is Zoom. So YouTube is being broadcasted? Yeah, right. Broadcasted? You publish it to all the groups? Yeah, in the right. Okay, then we can close that.
Okay, so are you positioning that in such a way that you can see this also? Yes. Thank you. So normally when we hear the word demoniac nature, okay, I'll just move this aside. We may think of, okay, yeah, okay, no problem. So when we think of demoniac nature, we may think of some people who are like terrorists or criminals. Sometimes when we think of the word demon, we might think of some sinister looking being with horns coming out of their head and teeth coming out of their mouth. And that's what we think of demons. And that is possible. However, the way the Bhagavad Gita is telling this, the demoniac and the divine, these are not so much physical forms as mindsets. So this is a mindset which anybody can have. So we can say this divine demoniac nature. If you see, there are 2 main epics in the broad Indian tradition. Which are those 2 epics? Yes, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Now, there is one major difference between the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. There are many differences, but in terms of this analysis of, this is a species or it is a mentality. Well, it can be a species also, but it is much more a mentality. So if you see in the Ramayana, the villain is a demon who has both the mentality and the species. Ravan is from a species of Rakshasa, so he has 10 heads. Of course, you can conceal that and look attractive. But he is very much a demon in a form of species also. So if we consider the villain in the Ramayana is species and mentality. But if we consider in the Mahabharata, who is the villain mainly? Now, is he a demon? Well, he is very much a human being. In fact, he is like the cousin of those who are the heroes, the Pandavas. But he is a demon in mentality. So the demoniac is a mentality, and that mentality can come in anyone. So in the Bhagavad Gita, there are two different words used. So Rakshas is a species, and Asura can be a species, but it can also be a mentality. So there is no species like a Asura. There is a Rakshasa species. And so there are Rakshasas who generally have Asuri mentality. Hmm? But there are also Rakshasas who may not have an Asuri mentality. Can you, if you think of an example like that? Prahlad, yeah. You say one more? Vibhishan. Yes, in the Bhagavatam, there's one particular character. Yes, Ritrasur. Good example. Thank you. So these are characters who externally were born genealogically. Now, as far as Prahlad and Vibhishan are concerned, in most depictions, they're also not shown as demoniac. But Ritrasur physically has the form of as a Rakshasa, but still he has a divine mentality. So these divisions are not neat externally. Sometimes we have this idea that this is black and this is white. So color education, if you're going to teach our children something initially, we start with, okay, this is black, this is white. And that is good. We have to teach in terms of black and white distinctions. But after some time, the child has to function in real life. Most colors in real life are not black and white. So this is, you could say, initial education. And initial is more of clear categories. But afterwards, we understand that there is black, there is white, but within that there is a spectrum. And there is grey in various shades. So in real life, people who are fully demoniac are there, but they are few. And people who are fully godly are also there, but they are few. Most of us, we exist somewhere on the spectrum. Most of the people that we see also, they exist somewhere on the spectrum. And we are all born somewhere on the spectrum. That's why Krishna uses the word Abhijatasya Bharata. We are born with a particular nature. However, where we are born does not mean that that is where we will stay throughout. So, for example, somebody may be born on the demoniac side, but that person may move towards a godly nature during the course of their life by their wise choices. On the other hand, somebody may be born a godly nature, but they may move towards the demoniac side by their choices. So today we will discuss that if the divine and demoniac, they are not just external forms, they are natures, then how do we identify those natures? And of course, after identify, how can we rectify? How can we rectify it in ourselves? How can we rectify it in others? As soon as you think of the word rectify, our tendency is to think about others. How can I fix this person? How can I fix that person? But we all could work on fixing these things. Now, our nature can be identified by broadly two things. Our bonds and our boundaries. Bonds refers to what is it that is most important for us. What is it that we are fixed on? What is it that is, in one sense, the most important thing in our life? For some people, say their bonds may be their family. For some people, their bonds might be their country. They say, for my family, I can do anything. For my country, I can even lay down my life. So the bond, what are you bounded to? So in one sense, bond refers to, we could put it in this way, that what we live for, or what we give ourselves to. When we are bonded to something, here I am not using the word bond in a negative sense. Bond is different from bondage. Bondage is attachment, it is bandhan. But bond is in this is what we are invested in. What we give ourselves to. And boundaries are what we give up for that thing. What are we ready to give up for it? Generally, love is expressed in two ways. When we love someone, what are we ready to do for that person? And what are we ready to give to that person? And what are we ready to give up for that person? If we love someone, then, I'll do this for you, I'll do this for you. And you don't want me to do this? Okay, I'll give that up for you. So love is expressed in two ways. So similarly, people are broadly defined by their bonds and their boundaries. Let me explain this. I explained bonds briefly. And I said, now what is it the most important thing in our life? What is it that we live for? In one way, the bonds are like attachments. But there is a positive side to bonds. Now, how do we identify our bonds? One easy way is to evaluate what do we think about when we have nothing to think about. And we are bonded to something, our thoughts naturally gravitate in that direction. So, what do we think about when? Do you remember what I said? Yes, when we have nothing to think about. So all of us, we have certain work to do which requires thought. Say if you are driving through a crowded road, then we have to pay full attention, okay, who's coming from where. But it's a long straight road with no pathways coming, it's a straight lane we are going on. Then our thoughts, some part of our thoughts are there on the road, but you're thinking about other things also. So where do our thoughts naturally go towards? That indicates our bonds. Now, in contrast, boundaries. Boundaries refer to how far how far are we? What is it? Sorry. So, how far are we ready to go in pursuit of that? Say, for example, everybody gets angry. Now, when we get angry, some of us may raise our voice. Some of us may not just raise our voice, but may also use foul words. Some of us may go beyond that and maybe raise our fists. Some of us, when we get angry, we may look for some things. Find some utensils or something, or throw at other person. Some of us, hopefully none of us, may look for a knife or a gun. Some people may actually try to find, maybe where can I find a bomb and blow up the person. So we all have certain boundaries. We'll all get angry, but even when we get angry, there are certain things which we will not do no matter how angry we get. Those are our boundaries. Say for example, we all want wealth in life. That is just a human need at one level. And for seeking wealth, what are we ready to do? Okay, I'll work hard and I'll earn money. Maybe if I had to do some networking, the networking is maybe a more polite word. Politicking can be a more impolite word. Maybe I can do a little bit of that. But, I'm not going to outright lie or do anything illegal. Okay, I'll do something illegal as long as it doesn't harm anyone. I can say everything illegal harms someone. Okay, but there's something which directly harm people. Something that the harm is not directly visible. Okay, different people may have different boundaries. Even one of my friends works in the police, and he says that even criminals, even hardcore criminals, they have boundaries. Like even criminals, if somebody is arrested and put in jail, say for example child abuse, even criminals are hard on such a person.
because even they consider that a despicable activity. How can you abuse a child like that? So then they will attack a person like that. This is something which we will never do, and we also condemn somebody who does something like that. So everybody has their boundaries. And in one sense, if we want to know a person, we can try to know what their bonds are and what their boundaries are. So now it is not easy to know a person's boundaries. Srila Prabhupada talks about this. One's greatness can be estimated by one's capacity. Then remember the quote? To tolerate provocations. So generally, in normal life, it is very easy to be polite and courteous and humble and well behaved. But when some things don't go our way, especially some things go the opposite of the way we want them to go, that is the time when we tend to get provoked. And then our boundaries or our lack of boundaries, that becomes evident. In one sense, everybody has boundaries, but they can change. They're not fixed. So, in the Western world, now we are here in the West, but in the Westernized culture nowadays, most people, when they want to get married, there is no idea of, say, arranged marriages. So most people date to get married. So I was at one devotee's house, the Western devotee couple. They run a dating service for devotees. And they have this, not for devotees and everyone, that's their job. So they said that one of the tests they have, say if a boy and a girl are meeting at a particular place, they are trying to explore whether they should develop a relationship. So normally both of them, they try to put up the best face forward. So what they do is that when they go to a particular hotel, they have a relationship with the waiters over there. And the waiter will deliberately go and spill something on the two people at different times. And now when we are trying to make the best impression and somebody does something so outrageous, how do you react? That shows your boundaries. Now don't get any ideas. But the idea is that, the point is that our boundaries are revealed when there are provoking situations. So our bonds and our boundaries. If we understand these two things about a person, we can get a fair understanding of that person. So, in one sense, in the divine and the demoniac nature, the difference is not that the Devatas, say, do not have desires to enjoy. The Devatas also live in celestial regions, and there are apsaras, there is wine, a celestial kind of wine, it's called soma, and they drink that. But the difference is that the Devatas have boundaries. Of course, sometimes Devatas may also transgress the boundaries, but in general, they have boundaries. Vishnu Bhakta Smrito Devo Asurastad Viparyayo. That they understand the principles of dharma. And they try to follow the principles of dharma. They conduct themselves within those boundaries. And the Asuras, they don't have boundaries. They just, for them, whatever strikes their desire, whatever their fancy, they are ready to do that. And for them, the only problem, the only need for boundaries for them is that the only boundaries are those violating which might get me into some trouble. That is a boundary. I once saw one cartoon which said that a traffic cop, a person was going very fast, and the traffic cop chased him, and the traffic cop pulled him over. He says, "You are going too fast." He says, "Not really. If I had been going too fast, you would not have caught me." So the idea is that it's not that I was going too fast and I'm sorry. Actually, I should have gone faster. Then you wouldn't have caught me. So for such people, the problem is not doing something wrong. The problem is not doing that wrong thing well enough that you won't get caught in doing it. Well enough, fast enough, shrewdly enough, cunningly enough that you don't get caught up doing it. So, in one sense, there is a functional boundary that everybody has. But is there like a moral boundary? Moral boundary means internally I won't do it. Right? Even if I have the opportunity to get away with it. See, for many people who parade a very high sense of morality. Now, this is a cynical way of looking at things, but there is some amount of reality to it. Morality is often just the lack of opportunity. That means I appear high and moral because I don't have the opportunity to be immoral. But if, for most people across the world, whichever country I've gone, I've talked with people, everybody complains about the local politicians over there. Every country. It's almost like politicians are the favorite whipping boys of everyone. Whipping boy, this term, in the past, there were wealthy people, when they would get angry, they would have a boy who they would pay to vent out their anger on. They would whip that boy. It's a very sinister practice. But the idea is, so that practice is no longer present. But the idea is, everybody has something that they blame. So for people, one of the favorite whipping boys is politicians. Politicians are corrupt, politicians are selfish, politicians are this, that. Well, yes, there is definitely truth to that. But is there any objective evidence that politicians are more corrupt than any other professions? If we got the kind of power and wealth and control that politicians have, now would we ensure that we wouldn't become corrupt? Hopefully we wouldn't. But unless we are in that situation, we don't know. So, morality is often a lack of opportunity. Not always. There is character. So, when we are talking about boundaries, we could say there are boundaries is what we won't do ever. And when we are talking about boundaries, we are not so much talking about functional boundaries here. Functional means operational or behavior. This is not what we are talking about. I can't do it, so I won't do it. But it's more of moral boundaries. That I can't live with myself if I do this. It is not who I am. So we are defined by our bonds and our boundaries. Now, in this particular verse which we are discussing today, how is all this relevant to the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and the verse we discussed? Here, the verse is saying, Kama Krodha Parayanaha. So here, the individual that is being described, their bonds are actually to Kama and Krodha. Asha Pasha Shatair. That person is bound to many desires. Baddha. And they had given themselves, they are dedicated. Normally the word Parayana is a rhyme to Narayana. So those who are devoted, those who are bhaktas, they are often called as Narayan Parayana. Parayana means one who is devoted to, one who is given oneself to. So they are devoted to Narayana. But here, these demoniac people, they are devoted to Kama and Krodha. So some people say, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. Well, I once gave a class on the topic, God doesn't believe in atheists. So what does it mean? Normally we say, atheists don't believe in God. So what does it mean, God doesn't believe in atheists? What it means is that, can you even guess what it means? Sorry, nobody is actually atheist? That's one understanding. Yeah, true, we'll come back to that. Yeah. They have some kind of surrender. Yeah, that's true. So it could be both meanings. God doesn't believe in atheists means that even if somebody is an atheist, somebody aggressively touts their atheism, God sees beyond it. Yes, you are a soul, you are my part. This is a temporary conditioning on you right now. It may be chosen by you. See, for example, the Gita explains that our self has 3 levels. There's the soul, mind and body. The soul, the mind and the body. So, atheism can be a conditioning on the mind. It's temporarily there. In this life, a person might be atheist. In the next life, they might not be. Even in this life, for some time, a person might be atheist. Afterward, they are not. So, atheism is a conditioning in the mind. And God sees beyond that conditioning to the soul. And the soul, every soul, even the soul of a person who claims to be an atheist, Mamaivam Sho Jiva Loke. Krishna says, everybody is my precious part and parcel. So, in that sense, God doesn't believe in atheist. So, so atheists don't exist really means that, atheism may be their current belief. But ultimately, beyond it all, their souls were parts of God. And that's one way of looking at it. Another is that we can say that God is ultimately, while there is of course an ultimate reality God, but God at one level can be understood to be the locus of ultimate value. There are many different definitions of God. Sometimes say God is generator, organizer, destroyer. Sometimes God is the cause of all causes. But functionally, God means the locus of ultimate value. If we truly understand who God is, that means in this world there are many things of value. But the most valuable thing, the most important thing is God. So that is one understanding of God. And from this understanding, we could say there are 2 things. Now, if this is sounding a little complex, don't worry. It will just become more complex. But afterward, I'll make it simple. What I mean is that now when we talk about God, there is an objective locus of ultimate value. That means there is one being. There is one being who is the most important being. That being underlies all of existence. That being governs all of existence. When I was growing up, around one, I got polio. Some of you may notice I needed crutches for walking. So one of my first memories is when some relatives or friends or of my parents would come to meet my parents. So they would say that it's so sad that your son has got this polio. And my mother used to say that, whatever he lacks in physical ability, God has gifted him in intellectual ability. So when I heard that, I used to wonder, who is this being God and why does he get to decide such things? What I lack and what somebody lacks and what somebody has. But that idea that, if we just live life a little, we can be sure about one thing, that we are not God. Isn't it? We are not in control of things. We try to control some things, but we don't control everything. Now, after that, we have 2 options. Either there is somebody in control or there is nobody in control. So now, that is from the perspective of controlling. But we all believe something controls. Say, for example, somebody may believe that wealth is the most important thing. Okay, I don't have control right now, but if I get sufficient wealth, then I can control things. I can prevent bad things from happening to myself or to my loved ones. If I can just develop the right connections. If I develop contact with politicians, with celebrities, with this, with that, then I can control things. So basically, there is an objective locus of ultimate value. Objective means who is actually real. And then there is a subjective locus of ultimate value. Subjective locus means each one of us, for us, we think of something as our ultimate value. So for some people, money may be the locus of ultimate value. Money is the most important thing in my life. If I get money, I can solve any problem. For an alcoholic, it may be alcohol. There is no problem so big that it can't be dissolved in a bottle of alcohol. Now, can it be dissolved? Well, only thing that is dissolved is our own intelligence. But people think like that. So wisdom, ultimate wisdom, or we can say enlightenment. There are many levels of wisdom. The highest level is enlightenment. Enlightenment is when our subjective locus of ultimate value coincides with the objective locus of ultimate value. That is, what is most valuable, I accept as most valuable. During the course of our life, a child may think that, okay, my score, if I'm playing cricket, what is my cricket score? That is the most important thing. Or what are my marks? That is the most important thing. Somebody is young and trying to form a relationship, they will look, I think, at my looks and my physical dimensions are the most important thing. Somebody think my salary is the most important thing. Different people may think different things are important. But when what we value the most coincides with what is actually of the most value, that is when we move towards wisdom, and not just wisdom, ultimately enlightenment. So in that sense, we can say everyone has some God or the other. It is just not the real God. For some people, money may be their God. So in Greco-Roman tradition, there was a god of money called Mammon. And people who worship, this is Mammon, not Mormon. Mormon is a Christian denomination. Mammon. So the worship of money is called worship of Mammon. Then there are people who worship sensual desire. So the god is Cupid. People may be attracted to that. So for different people, there are different things of value, of ultimate value. So in this verse it is said, Kama Krodha Parayana. Such a person who is devoted to Kama. So their bond is to Kama. And ihante Kama Bhogartham. They seek the fulfillment of Kama. And because of that, what happens? Anyayen Artha Sanchayan. They start, for fulfilling desire, they need wealth. And for gaining wealth, they start doing anyaya. Anyaya is unfair activities. Now, when Krishna is speaking this, it is very, especially if you look at the next few verses, it is very easy to visualize that Krishna is thinking about someone. See, generally, when we communicate, we may communicate concepts. But when we are communicating concepts, most of us don't think in terms of concepts. We think in terms of pictures. So, if I say arrogant person, now as soon as I use the word arrogant person, I'll probably think of somebody who I know is arrogant. And if you hear the word arrogant person, then you will also think of somebody who is arrogant. If you think of somebody if I just use short-tempered people, then you will think of somebody who is short-tempered. Now, short-tempered or arrogant is a concept. But we understand concepts primarily through images. Now, sometimes out of politeness, we may not refer. We may say some people are short-tempered. Now, sometimes if a person is especially known to be short-tempered, then when people are speaking, the speaker knows who they're talking about, the audience knows who the speaker is talking about. Even without even mentioning it. It's clear. So, now in this verse, Krishna is talking about the bonds. The bond that a person has is to Kama and then Krodha. Now, Kama and Krodha are often said to be siblings, almost twins. Where there is Kama, often Krodha comes. So Kama is, I want this. And if anything comes in the way to getting it, why can't I get it? Who are you to stop me from getting it? So that is Krodha. So in that sense, Kama, actually these three major arthas Krishna will talk about in this chapter later. So Kama, when fulfilled, it leads to Lobha. When our desire is fulfilled, that desire doesn't just leave us peacefully and go away. That desire becomes stronger and stronger. And it grows towards Lobha. So Kama is desire, Lobha is greed. And when kama is unfulfilled, then what happens? Krodha. And the nature of life is that for all of us, some of our desires will be unfulfilled. We are all finite beings and with finite resources. And we have not infinite, but almost infinite desires. There's so many desires. So some other of our desires will be unfulfilled. When that happens, there will be krodha. Now for some people, the krodha may come out openly as anger. For some people, it may just come as irritability or resentfulness, or it can come also as self-loathing. They start hating themselves. Why am I not good enough to get this? The world is too bad that it doesn't let me have it, or I am too bad that I am not able to get it. So anger can be directed outwards, that it becomes aggression. Anger, when directed inward, becomes depression. So, when you talk about anger, when it is directed outward, it's easy to identify as anger. It is aggression. A person can be physically aggressive or verbally aggressive. But when it's directed inward, then it becomes depression. Why am I not good enough? Why can't I do this? Why can't I achieve this? And if I can't achieve this, then why should even I try for anything? Just because I can't achieve one thing doesn't mean I can't achieve anything in my life. But now depression can be a complex sociological phenomena, and sometimes it can have some physiological factors causing it also. So I don't want to oversimplify it over here. But the principle is that person who is depressed, we won't normally think of them as angry. But in one sense, what has happened is they have been beating themselves up so much. You fool, you couldn't do this. You are worthless. And you will never achieve anything. You are good for nothing. Why even bother? And by that, they end up beating themselves down so much that they just become bereft of any energy to do anything. And that is the state of depression. Okay. So now, yeah.
So how is karma on the material platform different from the karma of seeking God? So can we compare these two seekings? Both are seekings as a human nature. How is one different from the other?
Okay. How is karma, the desire for worldly things, different from the desire for God? It is phalena parichayate. It is by the result. Generally, if the desire for God is understood properly and it is activated properly, it brings out our higher nature. It inspires us to become more godly, more pure. So in one sense, we can say karma itself is value neutral. Some people say we have to give up desire. But that is impossible, because the very idea of giving up desire is itself a desire, isn't it? So we cannot really give up desire. So it is less about rejecting desires as selecting desires. Okay, which is a desire I want to cultivate? Which is the desire I want to nourish? So we can say among our various desires, there are some desires which elevate us and some which degrade us. So for example, if somebody has a desire to smoke or drink or do drugs, then that is a desire which will degrade that person. But on the other hand, say somebody has a desire to study and have a career, I get a degree. Now that desire will make them more responsible. Okay, I have to regulate myself. Somebody has a desire to have a family. Then that desire will, okay, I have to become financially stable. I have to become responsible. I have to take care of another human being or several other human beings. And then that will make them responsible. So some desires bring out our higher side. Some desires bring out our lower side. So among the various desires that can bring out our higher side, the desire for God is the highest among such desires. because God is supremely pure. And when we try to attain God, see, God is not just like an object, like a running race, we're going to touch that object. God is a person, and he's attained by his self-revelation. So when we are to attain him, we have to please him. And pleasing him requires changing ourselves, purifying ourselves. In one sense, this happens in any relationship. Now, if, say, for example, a child is growing up and a child gets good association, then a child goes to college and starts hanging out, a kid goes to college and starts hanging out with students who are very studious. Then what happens? That student might also be studious, but hey, they all study so much. They're so disciplined in their habits. I also want to become like that. If a person gets married, if they get married to a person who is good, who is principled, then in trying to please that person, in trying to connect with that person also has to develop their higher nature. So, same way, in order to please the Lord, what happens is, we need to become purified. Now, of course, there's one more thing over here. See, in relating with anyone good, we have to become good. But in relating with God, yes, we have to become supremely good, but God has the potency to help us in that. Other people can't automatically change our heart, but Krishna has that special purifying potency. So, the desire for God, it at one level inspires us to become good. Just like any relationship with a person who is, say, if we tend to be untidy, and then we form a relationship with somebody who is very tidy, then we don't want to make them unhappy, so we also start cleaning ourselves up, becoming tidy and orderly. So that is inspiration to become good. That can come from any relationship. But God alone, he can empower us to become good. He can actually clean our heart by his potency. So that is the speciality about the desire for God. So we could say various desires are on a continuum. Some desires are the desires that degrade us, some desires that elevate us, and so many desires can inspire us to become good, but God, the desire for God alone empowers us to become good. So if we consider a continuum of desires, so there are, at the bottom of this continuum, there are degrading desires. And then toward the end of the upper side of the continuum are elevating desires. And then in that, the desire for God is at the top. It is the most elevating desire. Does it answer your question? Thank you. So, in one sense, you jump to the conclusion of the class without letting me go toward the conclusion. So, let's look at this verse, this series of verses, and then we'll come to the point which you just mentioned. That will be the conclusion. So, I talked about how desires can degrade. So, in the next verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes about how a person who is devoted to Kama and Krodha, that person's boundaries become more and more extendable. So, for example, next verse Krishna says, Idam adhyamaya labdham imam prapse manoratham idam asti idam apime bhavishyati punardhanam. So, first he's saying is, so this is 16.13. So, such a person is covetous. Does anyone know the meaning of the word covetous? Covet? Covet is to desire, especially desire for things, desire for wealth. So basically you could say greedy for wealth. So Krishna is saying such a person is idamadhyamaya labdham, this much money I have gone now, And imam prapse manoratham. Oh, with my mind's schemes, my mind, if I just ride on my mind's chariot, this scheme I'll make, that scheme I'll get, I'll make more money. Idam asti, idam apime. This much money I have. Bhavishyati punardhanam. In the future, I'll have more and more. Say, we could envision people who, say, trade constantly in stocks. Okay, if I put this much money over, this will happen. If I put this much money over there, I'll get that with that much. Now, investing money is a prudent thing to do. Somebody can invest in stocks also, but somebody is obsessed with that. Oh, take the money out from here, put the money here, put the money here. And then the night before they sleep, they're looking at the stocks. In the morning, they wake up. The first thing they do is look at the stocks. And they're completely fixated with that. So that in general, everybody has the desire, as I said, to make more money. Now, to be obsessed with that may not be very healthy. But this is understandable. So their purpose is to fulfill desires. Kama, krodha, parayana. So the 13th verse describes they become covetous. And we could say this is a widespread thing. But the next verse takes it further to an alarming degree. Asau maya hatah shatrur hanishye cha paranapi ishvaro aham bhogi siddho aham balwan sukhi. Says asau maya hatah shatrur. I have killed this enemy. And I will kill that enemy in future. So from being covetous, the person becomes murderous. Mm-hmm. So this is a giant leap, isn't it? It's an extension of a boundary. In somebody, you hear this, you might think of some media, some underworld don like Daud Ibrahim or somebody like that. I kill this person, I'll kill that person now. Hanishye chaparanapi. Ishvaro aham bhogi. I am the controller, I am the enjoyer. Adyo ambalavan sukhi. Oh, I am powerful, I am wealthy, I am successful. So, then after that, the next verse describes such a person that yakshe dasya modishya ityajnana vimohitaha. He says that asau maya tashat hanishapra ishvaro hamam bhogi saddho balasuki konyosti sadrusho maya. He says, who is there like me? I will give charity, I will perform sacrifice, and in that way I will enjoy. So now this is going even further. This is not just being murderous, but this is actually being duplicitous. Now, why is being duplicitous? Is duplicitous being worse than being murderous? Well, not necessarily, but in this context, this person is so cruel that they can heartlessly kill somebody. But after that, that person may go to a temple and give charity. And they may have a big sacrifice being done. They may do some yajna. And they invite people to their house for yajna. So, it's one thing to be bad. It's another thing to be bad and portray oneself as very good. That means that person's conscience is almost dead. Like, I saw one cartoon once, one person is saying, and person was like, you are such a terrible person. How do you live with yourself? The second person says, nonchalant, I drink. So some people drink to forget how terrible the world is. Oh, this happened to me and that happened to me and that happened to me. And others drink to forget how terrible they are. So I just dumb down my conscience. And this requires a certain high degree of perversity. Now, to be bad and then to pretend to be good. So this is where, as I said, the person's conscience, we can say when the person murders itself, the conscience is gone completely. The conscience is our inner sense of what is right and wrong. That is gone. But on top of that, the person pretends to be good. Now, if we consider from the Bhagavad Gita's perspective, whom could Krishna be referring to when he's describing these verses? Duryodhan. Now, normally we think of Duryodhana as being envious, as being scheming, as a villain. Now, how did it start? It was, you could say that Abhijatasya, he had a demoniac nature. That is true. But he built on it by his own choices. See, when he was growing up, he was the heir apparent. Oh. Recently, I think among the British royalty, one of the princes, he wrote a book called The Spare. So there's the heir and there's the spare. So heir is the person who is going to become next king. And the other brother is like the spare. If the heir dies, then you will get something. Otherwise, you don't get it. It's like you are like a backup plan. So the spare. And that book is all about, from whatever reviews I read, it's become a very popular book. But all the book is about whining. These people didn't treat me nicely, and those people didn't treat me nicely, and this happened to me, and that happened to me. Well, even as a spare, he lived with great wealth. But he is whining about it. And anyway, the point is that he grew up expecting to be the heir apparent. And he's the heir. He was going to become next king. But then the Pandavas came back. The Pandavas had gone to the forest. They were born in the forest because Pandu had lived in the forest. He had retired from life, the royal life. But then Pandu died unexpectedly. When he died, the sages in the forest told Kunti, the forest is a dangerous place. There are many dangerous animals over there. Now better, now that you are alone, you have young children to take care of, you go back to the kingdom. And the sages themselves escorted her. They came with her to bring her back to the kingdom. So now, when the Pandavas came back, they were new. See, like in any house or any community, a new child comes. Generally, the adults are interested in the child. They dote on the child. So there was a natural affection being given to the Pandavas. And on top of that, Yudhishthir and all the Pandavas in general, they were well behaved. They had lived among the sages, and the parents had taught them good cultured values. On the other hand, Duryodhana was, relatively speaking, he had an entitlement mentality. He was sometimes rude. He was not exactly courteous. So because of that also, the affection of the citizens and the courtiers that started shifting from Duryodhana to Yudhishthir and the Pandavas in general. And now, so it's almost like, and on top of that, who was older? Yudhishthir had been born earlier. So earlier Duryodhana thought, I'll be the king. But now if Yudhishthir has come back, Yudhishthir is going to be king. So suddenly what happened? The heir became the spare. And now it's natural at this stage for Duryodhana to feel bad, to feel annoyed. And he thought, at least I'm powerful. Yudhishthir is not so powerful. But then there was one Pandava who outshone him in power also. Who was that? Bhima. And that is why, among all his brothers, he was the strongest. And his Bhima was so nonchalant. Bhima was not just stronger than him, was nonchalantly stronger than him. Sometimes they would wrestle, and Bhima would just pick up Duryodhana and throw him in the water. Duryodhana felt insulted by this. Now Bhima had no ill will in it. He was just playing. But Duryodhana felt highly enraged by it. Now this emotion is entirely understandable. However, see, our past can explain our emotions. It does not excuse our actions. Yes, if suddenly I start losing the prestige or the attention or the affection I am getting, then it's understandable. I may feel a little jealous. I may feel envious. But then what did Duryodhana do? He poisoned Bhima. Some people in India, especially the leftists, they are very subversive. Subversive means anything that the established order of things, they want to disrupt it. So they try to show how the good people are actually bad people and the bad people are good people. So they try to show actually Duryodhana is a good person. Once, in fact, I was invited to give a talk in a management institute. And they said, don't just give the normal thing. Say something special. And they suggested a topic. The topic they suggested what? Leadership lessons from Duryodhan. Now, it's not a wrong thing. If you consider how many brothers did Yudhishthir have? Sorry, did Duryodhan have? 99. Now, if any of you have one brother or sister, to get that brother or sister to obey you, it is not easy. And Duryodhan got 99 brothers to obey him. So, he must have had some leadership qualities. Isn't it? We don't deny that. We are not here in the business of black and white telling somebody is totally bad. Yeah, he had some qualities. When the Pandavas had to form, before the Kurukshetra war, they formed alliances. Duryodhana had persuasive ability. He had the capacity to spin narratives. So, he spun the narrative in such a way that many kings joined his side. And that's how he ended up having 11 Akshauhiya warriors. More than what the Pandavas got. All the Pandavas were virtuous. Although the Pandavas were much more virtuous. And they had clearly been wronged. The gambling match, it was their kingdom that had been stolen from them. It was their wife that had been dishonored. So Duryodhana had some leadership abilities. No doubt about it. But unfortunately, because of his uncontrolled greed, he ended up being a misleader rather than a leader. He led all his brothers to destruction. So in one sense, you can learn from I gave a talk where I said how you can learn from Duryodhan how not to be a leader or how to not lead. So there is the competence of a leader and there is the character of a leader. He might have had the competence of a leader, but he didn't have the character of a leader. So in one sense, the first stage of being covetous, I want affection, I want to be center of attention, I want to be the next king. That's an understandable desire. But from there to become murderous, it's a huge leap. So some people are subversive. They say that actually Duryodhana was not a bad person. Shakuni was a bad person. And because of Shakuni's association, Duryodhana became bad. Well, not exactly. Because Bhima's poisoning was not instigated by Shakuni. It was Duryodhana doing it himself. Afterward, the subsequent things, like what was the second attack on the Pandavas? Lakshagra. The sending them to Varnavath and setting their house on fire. That scheme was made by Shakuni. And then third big attack was the gambling match. That was Shakuni's idea. So it was not that Duryodhana was good and Shakuni made him bad. Duryodhana was bad and Shakuni made him worse. So the idea is that he had his boundaries, but those boundaries were very flexible. Now, flexible is not being said in the positive sense, in the negative sense over here. Very volatile, very extendable. So, first he was covetous, then he just jumped to being murderous. And not only that, after that, when the Pandavas had been exiled, people can gain power, but they can't gain respect. Or you can say externally, you can gain the trappings of respect. If you have power and you intimidate others, people may bow down to you, salute you and do things like that. But you really can't win the hearts of people unless you have that character. Now he wanted the reputation of being a great king. And that is why he performed a yajna. Now Yudhishthir had already performed the Rajasuya yajna. So he said, I want to perform the Rajasuya yajna. The sages said that, the Brahmana said that actually, as long as a person who has performed the Rajasuya yajna is alive, another king cannot perform the Rajasuya yajna. Duryodhana's first thought was, that's not a problem. I can eliminate him. But Dhritarashtra, that was one place he put his foot down. He says, don't go anywhere near the Pandavas. Don't antagonize them any further. Because although Duryodhana was brazen, Dhritarashtra still remembered Bhima's vows, the Pandavas' vows. when when they had witnessed the dishonoring of Draupadi. So he says, don't mess with them. So then they said, what else can I do? And then the Brahmana said that there is a yajna called the Vaishnav yajna. And you can perform the Vaishnav yajna. Now, he had no interest in being a Vaishnava. He had no devotion to Vishnu. So for him, the yajna was not a spiritual activity. It was a social activity. In a pious society, sometimes a social activity gives prestige. In a pious society, sometimes a religious activity brings prestige. So then he did that. So that was Yakshe Dasyam Imodisha. He said, I'll perform a big yajna and then I'll give generous charity. And when I give that charity, then people will praise me. And that will be the success of my life. So this is being duplicitous. So here, what happens is, for all of us, now if we look at this, we will understand that in some ways, we start understanding his degeneration. That, as I said, our past, what it can do is, it can explain our emotions. His jealousy, his greed, his insecurity, his anger. We can understand that if we look at his life. It can explain our emotions, but it doesn't excuse our actions. Just because he felt like that doesn't mean he was right in doing this. So his actions were inexcusable, and eventually he had to be punished for it. So demoniac people are, this is the concluding point I'll talk about now. Demoniac people are not just, as I said, we started by saying, they're not just people with horns or teeth coming out of their mouth. Demoniac is a mentality. And what is that mentality defined by? It is defined by two things. We talked about individuals are defined by two things. What are the two things? You remember? Bonds and boundaries. So for them, their bonds are to their lower desires, to their degrading desires. So they're bonded to lust, they're bonded to greed, they're bonded to their lower desires. And their boundaries are all extendable. Okay, I can always do this. I'll say I won't do it now, but in the future if I get an opportunity, I'll do it. So there is nothing that is sacred for such people. There is no boundary that is non-negotiable for such people. And that is we could say, the trajectory of degeneration. So for all of us as individuals, we have to see what are our bonds and what are our boundaries. And sometimes when we are practicing spiritual life, when we are trying to follow certain principles, when we are trying to devote ourselves to Krishna, at that time, sometimes we focus too much on boundaries. Now, this is what I should not be doing. And sometimes if we succumb to a particular kind of habit, we have a relapse into a particular kind of behavior, we start beating ourselves up. We may start feeling very guilty. That is not an undesirable thing, but if that's constantly happening, then that can be psychologically unhealthy. See, among the two, bonds and boundaries, which are more important? Okay, how many of you think boundaries? Boundaries? Okay, how many of you think bonds? Okay. Thank you. Actually, both are true. In one sense, in terms of our behavior, because the boundaries are more important. The world doesn't care how many rounds we chant or what time we wake up or how much we fast on Ekadashi. The world will care how we behave. When you are when you are provoked, do you get angry or do you stay calm? For example, one characteristic of people who are spiritual, you should be able to stay calm, you should be able to stay composed, isn't it? So people often say nowadays that don't tell me what you believe, show me how you behave. So, from the perspective of our present, from in terms of our social conduct and social behavior, our boundaries are important. But in terms of our transformation, if we want to change for the better, it is our bonds that are more important. When we bond ourselves to something higher, something meaningful, something uplifting, then naturally the boundaries will strengthen themselves. It will be, if we become devoted to Krishna, we become purified, and naturally, okay, certain ungodly pleasures, we will ourselves be able to give them up. So, in terms of importance, so we could say social importance. In social importance, it is boundaries that are more important, because people see how we behave in life. These boundaries are in terms of our behavior. In terms of our personal or transformational importance. In terms of what is going to transform us, it is our bonds that are more important. It is what we are attached to, what we are living for. That is which is the most meaningful thing in our life. That is what is going to inspire us to give up other things as less meaningful, as less important for us. So it is not so much of, in bhakti, we are not so much giving up desires, as bhakti centers not so much on giving up desires as taking up higher desires. Srila Prabhupada was defined, he was a grahastha throughout most of his life. Many of his god brothers were sannyasis throughout their life, and they were also, many of them were great souls, no denying them, their greatness. However, what distinguished Srila Prabhupada, what actually enabled him to to travel all over the world, took up that desire. It was that desire that drove him across the world, that kept him awake late from early in the night till the morning, writing his books. That was what distinguished him. That was what defined him. So bhakti is not so much about giving up desires. It is more about taking up desires. So we can talk here about it is giving up lower desires. Definitely in bhakti we have to give up many of our lower desires. But what is more important is taking up higher desires. So we say giving up lower desires is like the boundaries. This is I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this. But taking up higher desires is the bonds. The more we develop bonds, the more we will naturally rise upwards in our life. And that is how we can become purified. That is how we can become the best that we have the potential to be. We can be transformed. We all can develop our godly nature. And we can become what God wants us to be. We can fulfill the potential and the destiny that God has in store for us. So I'll summarize. I spoke today mainly 4 distinct points. So the first point I started with was discussing, to understand people, there are 2 characteristics. That are, what are the 2 characteristics? Bonds. Bonds is what do they live for, and boundaries is what are they ready to never do. And then so we discuss this elaborately, and then in the second part, after understanding this idea of bonds and boundaries, I discussed about the degeneration as described in this verses 16:12 to 16:12, 13, 14, 15. How a person who is devoted to something lower, like Duryodhan. So what is his generation was? From covetous to murderous to duplicitous. that in this case, to be murderers and to claim to be virtuous as having performed great yajnas, that was a very hypocritical thing to do. Then the next part we discussed was about how we we all need to, if we are to change ourselves, we need to actually so demoniac and divine nature people, so they are both have their bonds and their boundaries, but their so we could talk about mainly the spectrum of desire, the continuum of desires, and how different desires can have different effects on us. Some desires degrade, some desires elevate. And the desire for God elevates the highest, because that desire doesn't just inspire us to become good, but it also empowers us to become good, because God alone has that purificatory potency. And then the last part discusses how we can change ourselves by bonding ourselves to higher things, bonds to higher realities, bonds to higher. We focus on bonds more than boundaries, especially in terms of our personal transformation. And that way, each one of us can change for the better. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, please.
So are bonds and boundaries interdependent, or they are dependent on each other?
What is the difference between your question? Interdependent and dependent means what exactly?
I want to say, would changing our bonds define our boundaries? Because the way you explained in the last section is we need to focus on, boundaries are social, right? Social behavior. But would bonds, the things we're attached to, change our social behavior?
Okay. So, what is the nature of the relationship between bonds and boundaries? Definitely, they are related. That generally, people who don't have boundaries are people who never had healthy bonds. Sometimes here in America, there is this horrific cases of children or kids going out and shooting in schools. Now, some people say it's we should outlaw guns for that purpose, and that could be one measure. But beyond that, there is several studies done, and most of these kids, they grew up in dysfunctional families. So one of the biggest responsibilities of parenting is setting boundaries. No, generally we say we should love our children, and of course we should love our children. But one of the most important words a child needs to hear while growing up is no. You say, what is that? That's deprivation. No, it's very simple. Say if a child is eating food, and then the food in the child's plate gets over, child starts grabbing food from the sibling's plate. The parent says, no, you want more food? We'll give you more food, but don't take from somebody else's. But the sibling may tolerate, the family may tolerate. But if the child goes up and goes to college or school, at that time the friends are not going to tolerate. If the child grows up and goes to a formal, maybe working in a company, and the formal dinner is there, and child starts taking food from other. That's not going to work, isn't it? So, one of the most important things that a child learns in a good family, in a good upbringing, is boundaries. And it is not by the parents haranguing the child, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. It is rather when the parents love the child, then actually the child wants to please the parents. And in pleasing the parents, or in the opposite of that, not wanting to displease the parents, the child learns boundaries. So, so bonds and boundaries are definitely related. And I was talking more in terms of that if we want to change ourselves, if we focus too much on boundaries and not on bonds, then we may end up failing and fueling guilt within ourselves. So that was what I was trying to say, that we emphasize bonds more. But definitely, if somebody is devoted to the Lord, say for example, somebody is practicing, claiming to be a devotee, and if they are ill-behaved, then there is definitely a deficiency in their devotion. Is that a signal the class should end?
I have a reminder for Chiru.
Okay. Should I ask? What is the reminder? Okay. So, um, so our higher bonds need to be seen in our boundaries. Now, of course, it could be that some devotees, some people are practicing bhakti now, they might have had no boundaries in the past. Like somebody was super short tempered in the past. And now, even now, they are angry. But the extent of their anger has decreased substantially. Now, what may happen is we may have come from a relatively calm family. We had always learned to control our anger. And we come to bhakti and we expect, how can a devotee be so short tempered? Well, yes, it is a reasonable question. But if you consider in the context of that person, their bhakti has brought them a long way. Although they may not be where we would expect a devotee to be, but they have come a long way. But the point, so in that way, it can be less judgmental and more understanding. But ultimately, when the bonds become stronger, healthier, then the boundaries also become firmer. So both are related in that sense. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, please. How are other three related here? See, moha, mada, matsarya, that is illusion, pride or arrogance, and then greed. No, and jealousy, envy. So, basically, these anarthas at one level are conceptual categories. No conceptual category neatly translates into actual reality. That's the problem with any kind of taxonomy. Say, for example, here in North America, we have, say, this is the map of America, and above that, there is Canada. It's like a neat division. But if you actually go to the boundary, not only is not straight, many places not clearly defined. If you say, which is this particular place? Is this tree in America or Canada? Okay, so this tree is in Canada. Okay. What about this river? No, this river is a partition between America and Canada. Okay, does that mean 50% of the river is in Canada and 50% of the water belongs to America? Well, okay. Maybe 50%. How are you going to define 50%? Do you create a bridge at the 50% level? So boundaries in real life are not that clearly defined. That is one of the main reasons for the conflict between India and China. So similarly, when you talk about boundaries, what exactly they say the difference between lust and greed? You could say lust when fuel becomes greed. But still we say lust is a category of itself. So lust is generally, we can say that it is, if we define kama as lust, then lust is generally sexual desire, the desire for sexual pleasure, and lobha is a desire for things. So that is general differentiation. But it's also that when a person has a desire for sexual pleasure, inordinate desire for sexual pleasure, then to fulfill that desire, a person also try to acquire more and more things by which they can pander to that desire. So that is also true. So if we look at these 6 anarthas, at one level, we could say lust, greed, and illusion. They are related with what I want. Now, how is illusion related to what I want? Illusion is like a more foundational anartha, where the idea is that this is what will make me happy. That is moha. Now that can relate to anything. Somebody can think alcohol will make me happy. Somebody can think that just Watching TV can make me happy. So we can give you some entertainment, some break, but whether it can make you happy is open to question, isn't it? So now, on the other hand, ang- sorry, anger, jealousy, and arrogance or pride. Hmm. These are more related with what others have in comparison to what I have. Now, this is a broad division, and again, I said, like any sort of classification is not watertight. Now, jealousy is very clearly that. We can easily understand that. That is, if somebody has something better than what I have, then we feel jealous over that. I saw one advertisement once which said it. It was a car advertisement. Buy this car and enjoy the envy in your neighbor's eyes. Now, okay, it's like, okay, don't even enjoy the car. It's enjoy the envy in your neighbor's eyes. It's such a low level of enjoyment. And tomorrow your neighbor buys a better car and they will enjoy the envy in your eyes. Where is this going to end? But when you say anger, like when I say at what level anger comes when our desire is not fulfilled. That is true. But generally, anger comes when somebody else has something that I don't have. See, for example, generally in society, revolutions occur. When do revolutions occur? See, if everybody in society is poor, people get used to that. But when people see that I am poor and this person has become so much wealthy, I don't get food to eat, and this person is just throwing away food. When the disparity in wealth becomes too much, then that's when revolutions occur. And revolutions are an extreme expression of anger. So, in jealousy and anger, it is more of what I don't have as compared to what others have. Now, with respect to arrogance, generally it is what I have more than what others have. Now, if I have IQ of say 160, then I may be proud among people who have IQ of 120 or 130 or 140. But if I go to university, maybe a top university, everybody has IQ of 160. Then there's nothing to be proud of over there, isn't it? So in that sense, arrogance is also comparative. But here, so when does arrogance come out? It is when I don't get something special which I think I should be getting because of what I have. So in one sense, you could say these are more comparative kind of things. But again, I said this is a broad analysis. It's not a watertight kind of categorization. But it's just indicative to understand this. Okay, thank you. Question? Yes, Mataji. Okay. The difference between expectation and acceptance, and does that also lead to anger? Yes, definitely. In one sense, we could say that in any healthy relationship, now a healthy relationship can also include our relationship with ourselves. We also need to have a healthy relationship with ourselves. There are two broad factors to it. If you consider pendulum, one is accepting and the other is expecting. So for example, let's consider parental relationship. At one level, parents should accept their children for who they are. But at another level, every parent has not just a right but also a responsibility to expect from the children. Children have so much to learn, so many good habits to develop, so many talents to manifest, and there is expectation that is important. So now, if there is too much accepting without expecting, then that can lead to complacency. That can lead to lethargy. On the other hand, if there is too much expecting without accepting, then that can lead to insecurity. The children may start feeling that if I don't get good marks, then my parents will no longer love me anymore. That is unhealthy for the children. So there has to be a healthy balance of both of them. So sometimes we think anger is bad. Well, no, not always. Anger is basically an indication. There are some situations where anger is not only a valid response, but it is a necessary response. Say, for example, if we see some bully torturing some small child, then at that time, if we don't feel anger, then there's something wrong with us, isn't it? So anger itself is not a bad thing. It is misplaced anger or misplaced or excessive anger that is a bad thing. So generally what happens is, when in this context, when there is expectation that is not fulfilled, and the emphasis is too much on expecting and too less on accepting, then anger arises in the relationship. Anger arises with the other person from whom the expecting is there. So now we have to have some honest communication to understand the other person, whether our expecting is unreasonable or is it reasonable. Is it realistic for the person? Is it not realistic? Everybody can improve. Yeah. But it is unlikely that somebody has an IQ of 110, no matter how much they practice and study and they do aptitude tests and things like that. They're not going to get an IQ of 170, 180. It can rise, but maybe they don't have that IQ. They may have some other talent. So if there is candid communication, then we can basically understand whether our expecting is helping the other person or harming the other person. So in general, if there is constant anger in a relationship, this constant anger with the other person, that indicates that the expecting is excessive. Now that could be because the other person is just doesn't care, or the other person doesn't have the capacity to live up to the expectation. That we have to find out what it is. So then we can take the appropriate action. Does that answer the question? Thank you. Little loudly, please. Hare Krishna. Well, that's a very negative way of portraying it. When we say that I'm unhappy with your behavior, in general, most of us, we learn to control our lower impulses by social influences. That means that, say, if we are speaking something, and say now, if I speak something, and suddenly you start frowning at me, and maybe I spoke something that displeased you, that will concern me. But maybe it's just something about you. But if I speak something, and every one of you starts frowning at me, then maybe what I spoke something was not, that's not a problem with you. Maybe it's a problem with me. There's something objectionable that I spoke. So in general, we all have lower impulses. And we can say that by self-discipline, we should control those impulses, which is true. But for most of us, the natural regulator for our lower impulses, so if you consider our lower impulses, most of the time they are regulated by social influences. Now, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, it depends. Sometimes it can be a bad thing. Sometimes people around us might inhibit our talents. But many times, it is what is the right behavior and wrong behavior we don't have the either the intelligence or the experience or even the time to process every time. So if we meet someone, as I say, do in Rome as Romans do. That is okay. This is the etiquette over here. This is the expected behavior. We behave accordingly. So in general, for most of us, we learn. A child learns to regulate their lower impulses by in that case the social influence of the parents. So as it's important for parents to set boundaries. Now it is of course the child and the parent can have an open discussion with the child once the child is a little grown up to say whether that particular boundary is reasonable, whether that boundary is achievable for the child. So sometimes the child might is child. If the child has grown up, this is important enough for me that even if it displeases you, I'm going to do it. Okay, that doesn't mean the parents stop loving the child, but that means okay, that this is important for that person. It's a conscious decision. So we can't center our life simply on pleasing someone else. But if we don't have anyone to please in our life, then there will be no center in our life except our own ego. Isn't it? That is very unhealthy. No, I don't care for anyone. Like, I saw one T-shirt, it's a very loud, very big font. I don't care what people think about me. Now, that person is saying that, but then they are writing it. That means they care. That people know that I don't care for you. So they care what people think about them. So I am not a conformist, and I want you to know that. So we cannot live as isolated creatures. So I think it's not that the child's existence is for pleasing the parents. Every child has potential, and you can say parenting is a cooperative endeavor where the child's desire to please the parent and the parent's desire to mold the child both lead to the child becoming the fullest version of what they can be. Okay? Okay. Yes, please. I'll come to you.
So, Prabhu, I had a question like in the spectrum of our desires, how much should we focus on managing our bonds that we have, and how much should we just focus on our purpose?
Just focus on our?
Like, just focus on what we are, like, what we might be currently doing, and how socially we are doing some certain things, and how much should we focus on, like, what actually my bonds are in my transformation, like what currently my bonds are in that spectrum of desire. Like, how much should we focus on analyzing them, and how much should we focus on?
Okay, so how much should we just focus on doing what is expected of us, and how much should we analyze our bonds? It doesn't have to be that we are constantly analyzing, but overall, we do need a hierarchy of values in our life. Because there are many things important for us, and especially the way we live in life today. Our life is so fast-paced with so many things demanding our time, attention, energy. So we will have to say no to some things. And then what do we say no to? That rather than it being decided by just our impulsive feeling at that time. If we have done some serious analysis, then we can decide that properly. Say for example, if we have if it's a child's birthday at home and our boss tells us, you have to stay and work today. It's an important deadline. So what do we do at that time? Now, somebody may say, okay, my job is important. I have to be here. Somebody said, no. Ultimately, why am I doing my job? To take care of my family. If I can't be there for my family, what is the use of the job? Now, is one right and the other wrong? Not necessarily. It depends. Now, we say at that time, one may just take a decision. And then they may later introspect. Sometimes people take a decision whose displeasure will hurt me more. That may be the best basis of the decision. Is my boss a troublesome boss who's going to hold it against to me for who, as long as I'm in this company? Or are my children cranky and they're going to hold it against me? Whatever. You may decide like that. Well, that as a decision at that moment, that's okay. But suppose later you have to decide, I have a more lucrative job elsewhere available. But if I go there, maybe the schools for my children are not that good. So then should I take that job or not? Now that is a more, it's not just one moment decision, that's a long term decision. It is going to have far reaching consequences. So then we need to have thought through things. Okay, what is more important for me? So we can say we also have multiple bonds, but which bonds are more important? That is something which we have to carefully think through. And if we have our highest bond as Krishna, then everything else we do is in a mood of service to Krishna. So our job is a service to Krishna. Our taking care of our family is also service to Krishna. So the Krishna bond can seem just like one more bond, but it is actually something that underlies and unifies all bonds. Okay, thank you. Okay, last question. Okay, you also have, how many questions are there? Okay, yeah.
So the question for you is, should Duryodhana be the heir apparent since he is the eldest son of the eldest son Dhritarashtra, regardless of whether Yudhishthira was elder to him or not?
Okay. Should Duryodhana have been the heir apparent? See, that's why this is not a black and white answer. In one sense, the genealogy, the way it passed, primogeniture was the principle. So Dhritarashtra was never the king. He became a caretaker king when Pandu retired early. So technically speaking, Pandu was the king, and after that Pandu's son would have become the king. Now, when Pandu retired and Dhritarashtra became the king, although caretaker king, but effectively he was on the throne of the king. Then his son was expected to be the king. Now, when the Pandavas came back, it was not that Kunti came back with the expectation or the demand that my son should become the king. Kunti came back with sages told that in the forest there are dangerous animals, but she came to the kingdom and she discovered in the palace there are even more dangerous animals. So now, throughout, if you see, never once did the Pandavas demand the full kingdom. So, eventually when Dhritarashtra gave, he gave half the kingdom to his own son and he gave the half the kingdom to Pandava. That was also only a nominally fair division, because it was effectively, he gave the prosperous part of it to his son and the barren part of Khandav to his brother. So, yes, we could say because the genealogical descent was a little complex and the claims could be confused. Contradictory claims could be made. So the Pandavas were always ready for a peaceful solution. But Duryodhana was not ready for a peaceful solution. Eventually, when the Indraprastha Khandav was converted into Indraprastha, that was entirely the Pandavas doing. It is like somebody who gets maybe a wealthy parent has two companies, and one is flourishing, the other is near bankruptcy. And then the second one of the children just gets a bankrupt company, and then they work hard and they transform it into a prosperous company, and then the other sibling takes away that company. So this was not inherited. This was actually earned. It was cultivated. And even then, the Pandavas, before the Kurukshetra war, they said, just give us 5 villages. They're ready to settle even for that. So yes, so it was never actually decided that Yudhishthira alone would become the king. Now, Yudhishthira certainly didn't make the claim like that, and neither did anyone else openly say that. It was Duryodhana's insecurity that made him mad with that fear. And that's what made him do terrible things. Okay, thank you. Yes, bro, we'll stop with it. Yeah.
Similar line of Duryodhana, the characterization of Duryodhana. In Mahabharata, we also see that it is mentioned, Duryodhana says, Janati dharmam nachami pravritti, Janati adharmam nachami nivritti. So he's kind of seems to be very well knowledge, well versed with the dharma, adharma, but he still could not control his enviousness towards the Pandavas. So is the enviousness and the bad association of Shakuni and the other Karna and Dushyasana, that the major contributor for his is against Pandavas or it is the desires? Is there a differentiation we can make?
Okay, so there's a saying that is attributed to Duryodhan. It says, I know what is right, but I don't feel any inspiration to do it. I know what is wrong, but I don't feel any reason to give it up. Hmm. So, why is that? Well, Duryodhana is a complex character, like all of us. All people are not linear, predictable beings. Hmm. It's not like cause A leads to action B or something like that. Always true. That is later when the Shanti proposal is happening. Krishna has come as a peace envoy. That before Krishna comes, there are many sages and many elders who advise Duryodhana to avoid war. And when he refuses Krishna's proposal, that time people get angry with him also. And yet, at that time, Duryodhana says that, why are all of you blaming me? Everyone acts according to their nature, and the Creator has given me my nature. I simply acted according to my nature. So now, this is a specious argument. Specious means false argument. Now we all have our nature. But if somebody says it's my nature to be short-tempered, does that mean you stay short-tempered all the time? No, there is a part of a nature needs to be reformed. There is a part of our nature which is to be developed, but there is a part of nature which also to be reformed. So even if somebody can say that, okay, I just have no inclination to do good, okay, but you can associate with people who do good and observe them, not to manipulate them, but to learn from them. And gradually the desire will come. Maybe the desire will take more time to come. So healthy desires can come sometimes in a person normally, just from within. For some people it can come through education. But actually healthy desires come best through association. That means generally we think of, say, a person is here and say an object is here. We think of desire as linear. Say, some of you may be smelling the delicious food that is there behind. So if you smell that, a desire comes. Okay, we want to eat that food. So that is a linear desire. But desires can also be triangular. Triangular means that I don't have a desire for something. First, how many of you have heard this term baklava? Okay, many of you, okay. When I had first gone to Australia, I think 2014 it was, I had never heard of it. So I went to one devotee invited me to their house, and then we had food, and then after I said, would you like to have dessert? So I said, what is that? He says, we have baklava. Now, the name baklava doesn't sound very sweet. So I said, maybe later. Then there's another devotee who had come with me to their house. He says, yeah, I'll have. And he took the baklava, and they took it, and with closed eyes, he was relishing it. Then I looked at it and I said, can I have one also? So, there was no linear desire. By hearing about it, I didn't get the desire. But by seeing somebody else enjoying it, I got the desire. That's a triangular desire. So, generally, most sensual or lower desires, they can develop linearly. Oh, we see something tempting, we see something attractive, we develop desires for that. But most higher desires, they develop triangularly. Very few people, they see a Bhagavad Gita and they say, I want to read it. Well, it may happen, but for most people, if they associate with somebody who is studying the Bhagavad Gita, who is delighting in the study of the Gita, who gets fresh insights from the Gita, see, what is so special about this? I also want to know. So it's a triangular desire. So if somebody may not have natural inner desire, somebody may not have linear desires by seeing something good, but they can develop triangular desires. And he consciously rejected that. That was, he had the association of Bhishma, he had the association of Vidura. He rejected that. He could have chosen that. So it was not, there was this conditioning by which he could have been disinclined. But our conditioning is not our destiny. We can change by our choices. Small choices could be made. But when one refuses to make those choices, then there's no, then one's conditioning will become one's destiny. Okay. So thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Thai Gaur Premanande. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I have written some 27 books, out of which I have brought the 4 latest books here. So Srila Prabhupada gave us Bhagavad Gita as it is, which is a definitive commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, and he encouraged us to study the Bhagavad Gita from multiple perspectives and write our realizations. So these are 4 books on contribution to the Gita from 4 different perspectives. This is the Bhagavad Gita from a applicational perspective. There's 365 articles. Each article is just one page, and there's a 1-sentence summary which can be easily memorized if required, but you can contemplate it on. And there are 3 reflection questions. So each article will take about 3-4 minutes, and each is based on one verse from the Gita. And there are 3 sections broadly: nourish yourself, nourish your relationships, and nourish your devotion. So within that, there are sections on how to deal with temptations, how to be less judgmental in our relationships, how to face adversities. The table of contents itself is around 20 pages. So there are 365 articles, so you can read any article that you like. Much of what I spoke today is from the section on nourish yourself, the section on empower yourself and how to deal with temptations. So that's from where most of what I spoke is. This is the Gita from an applicational perspective. Now beyond that, if you want to know what the Gita teaches, there are these 2 books as a part of the Gita study series. This is the Gita from a rational perspective. It follows the mood of the Gita commentator Baldev Vidya Bhushan. When we read the Gita with a rational mind, we might get some questions. Is the Gita a book of violence? It is telling Arjuna to fight, but does that mean it is recommending violence to everyone? So if not, then why not? Is the Gita literal or metaphorical, or something more than that? If God controls everything, then do we really have free will? If God is equal to everyone, then why is God treating one side as an enemy who is saying we should attack? So 100 questions like this are answered in this book. Each article is 2 pages, and there are some simple diagrams which illustrate the points. So like the diagrams which I was drawing in the class today. And this is the Gita from a relational perspective. It says 100 articles. This follow the mood of the commentator, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. This focuses on how the Gita is not just philosophy, it is actually an expression of Krishna's love for Arjuna, and by extension, divinity's love for humanity. So again, there are diagrams, and this is, if you would like to know how the Gita reflects and develops the relationship with Krishna and Arjuna, you would like to develop your personal relationship with the divine, then reading Bhagavad Gita can be helpful. And this is the Gita from an inspirational perspective. So what I talked about, our past can excuse our emotions, but it doesn't. Past can explain our emotions, but it doesn't excuse our actions. So like that, there are quotes inspired by different Gita verses. And this is a very accessible way of also studying, or rather sharing Bhagavad Gita and spirituality with people who are not interested in spirituality. If you give them a book, they may not read, but a simple calendar, they can just flip through it. So fanatics don't hold opinions. Their opinions hold them. So just because we have a right to be angry doesn't mean we are right to be angry. So anger as an emotion may be understood, but anger as action, that's not acceptable at times. So there are quotes like that, each is based on one verse. And this is also a very accessible way for you to say, just keep a calendar on your home reception or your workplace, and some colleagues or guests can read a quote, and then that you can inspire a spiritual discussion.
The last one is not available.
Oh, okay. So we had brought all these, but these we have already got exhausted, but we are ordering from India, and it'll come within a week or 10 days. So if any of you want any of these books, they are there behind. And if you take the full set, it's also available at a discount, and I'm there to sign if any of you want the books to be signed also. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
recently written several books. So please go online. You can find a lot about Prabhuji and his accomplishments and his contribution to society in terms of disciplines knowledge. So thank you so much, Prabhuji, for coming and joining us.
Happy to be here. Hare Krishna.
बाबू जी हम जब भगवत गीता भागवतम पढ़ते हैं तो वी नीड सम सर्टन काइंड ऑफ पायटी पायसनेस ताकि हम कृष्णा को फेस टू फेस देख सकें. तो जो ये डीमंस होते हैं डीमन कैटेगरी में गए रावण कुंभकर्ण दुर्योधन इन्होंने भगवान को साक्षात देखा. तो उनके अंदर कुछ पायटी थी कि मतलब हाउ कैन दे वर एबल टू सी दैम. और दूसरा क्वेश्चन फॉलो पे है कि लॉट ऑफ टाइम्स वी सी पीपल टॉक नेगेटिव और बैड अबाउट दुर्योधन कर्णा राइट. तो इज़ इट एक्सेप्टेबल क्योंकि उनमें इतनी पायटी थी कि वो भगवान को देख सके राइट. तो इज़ इट
Here. See, there is visual perception. It's perception with the eyes. There is comprehension with the head. And then there is appreciation with the heart. So Duryodhan only pursued Krishna with the eyes. He only saw Krishna's universal form. He said this is just some jadoo, magic. Now Karna had some level of appreciation with the head. He never outright criticized or blasphemed Krishna. But he didn't have devotion to Krishna. On the other hand, Pandavas had devotion to Krishna. So, it could be that they all had some piety. It could be that it's just their fortune that they happened to be there when Krishna appeared. But what is more important is not a person's character is defined not so much by what happens to them as by how they respond to it. So, at one level, you can say they are special characters, they are fortunate characters. That's true. But another level, all that is about what happened to them.